Good evening and welcome to Face to Face. I'm your host Niresh Eliathambi. Well, we have with us this evening a special guest who we found it rather difficult to catch when he was in office because he was constantly moving around, having to go overseas and so on. But he did accommodate us whenever possible, and we're thankful to that, to him. And I'm talking about Mr. Tharaka Balasuriya, former State Minister for Foreign Affairs, former MP for Kegol. Welcome, Mr. Balasuriya.
Thank you for having me, Niresh.
So you're looking very relaxed this time. The previous times you came, you were rushing in. I think the last time you came, you were about to go overseas on one of your many missions as state minister. And this time, of course, you are very relaxed, and that's nice to see.
Certainly, I'm a little bit under the weather, but other than that, I'm very relaxed, and I get to spend more time with my daughters, and then relook at things and see how to move forward.
And unlike perhaps some politicians, you're quite happy not having to run around for 12, 14 hours of the day with your phone constantly ringing and so on, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it gets a little bit of used to, in the sense that, now all of a sudden you work 12, 14 hours a day, 7 days a week, and then you don't have so much work now, and so you need to find some structure in your life also. But I think certainly after 12 years, I was for 2 years in the provincial councils and then 2 terms in parliament. I think I will enjoy my break.
Excellent, excellent. But of course, you are staying in politics very actively, of course, although now we have a new president, a new cabinet and parliament, and of course the local government elections are coming up.
Yeah.
Do you have any role to play in the local government election in terms of the party organization?
Yeah, well, there are some discussions pertaining to the local council elections. We had one today, and there's one in this evening also. Yeah, I mean, certainly I do intend on continuing on my political journey, and I think if it's winning and losing is a part of life, I suppose, and then. And in all honesty, I think the outcome of these elections was very much written before even it began. So I too was in 2 minds whether to contest or not to contest. And then I spoke to my father, and then I wanted to get his advice. And then what he advised me was that if you're in politics, whether you win or lose, you need to contest. And if you only contest during the times which you win, people will think that you're only there for them while you're in power, and not when you're not in power. So it was very important to me. I thought it was good advice, and it convinced me to contest.
Very sound advice indeed, I think.
Well, he's been there for some time, so I think he knows what he's talking about.
Right. Any predictions about the local government election? Of course, the date is not set yet, but it might be April or May, somewhere there. And any predictions? Because it's still within about 6 months of the parliamentary election. So when you have elections close together like this,
Yeah.
Sometimes the result is a foregone conclusion.
It's a bit too early to say. What matters, I think, in the local council elections is you need to have a personal connection with your constituents. Of course, that matters in a general election also. But what we saw in Alpitia, there was several independent teams, and there were several parties contesting. And let's say usually the local council ward is about 3 wasamas. So then if you have a lot of relatives in those 3 in your ward, you get a personal vote. So I think certainly the advantage will be with the government. They did exceedingly well in the general elections, and also I think if the local council elections takes place in March or May, I would think from here to how the government governs the country for the next 4 or 5 months, that also will be critical, and how the opposition will come together. If they show to the public that there's a united front to fight the government, I think more people will be enthusiastic in voting for the opposition.
Now, in the last 2 elections, the opposition parties didn't fare very well. The SJB now has only 40 seats in parliament, and the other parties have even less. I'm talking about the UNP or the UNF, which went under the gas cylinder, and then of course the SLPP, and also the minority parties. All fared less well than they did in the previous election. How do you see all these parties recovering? Because right now, with 159 seats in parliament, the NPP is at its zenith. It's at the top of its game. But when you look at history, you can't sort of see in 5 years' time that 159 becoming 165 or 170. It is always a way downwards rather than upwards from there. That's the history of Sri Lankan politics. If you look at J.R. Jayawardana's or Mrs. Bandaranaike's or any of those regimes, it was always a loss in popularity and number of seats. So that obviously means a gain for the opposition over the next few years. How do you see those parties recovering?
Certainly with time, as you mentioned, but I mean, let's not forget that the Yahapalana government also had a 2/3 majority. 2/3, although they didn't get it when the SLFV fraction and the UMP joined together, there was 2/3 in 2/3.
They managed to get
2/3 in parliament.
Amendments in.
And then also the President Gotabaya Rajapaksa managed to form a 2/3 government, and the Yahapalana government, they didn't fare very well in the next elections. In 2.5 years after the local council elections came, they lost the elections, and of course Gotabaya Rajapaksa was forced to resign in 2.5 years' time. So I think we are living in a age where there's an intersection between public policy and also technology, and people have exuberant expectations. You bring a government into power, and then you want things to happen very quickly.
Quick fixes.
Yes, and the situation which we are in, there's no quick fix. It's going to take some time. And it's, I think in that sense, I'm quite happy, certainly as an opposition politician, or I can too be critical of the government, saying that they have promised the everything under the sun, but now that they have come to power, they are not fulfilling those promises. But they have been pragmatic in not fulfilling those promises, because if they try to fulfill those promises, I think the economy will suffer. Even for example, when the president said that he's going to reduce the taxes for the middle class, and then he's going to increase the wages in after the budget. So that's going to have a lot of pressure on our budget deficit. We need to keep the budget deficit to 5%, 5% as for the IMF the conditions. So I think the fact that they're not fulfilling their promises is some sign of pragmatism from the NPP. But if they try to fulfill some of those promises, such as increasing the salaries, it's obviously going to be very difficult to manage the economy.
With a lot of pressure on the budget.
Yeah, but we can't also, as an opposition, we can't wait till they fail and hope that the people will bring us to power. I think a good example is that perhaps the SJB hoped that we would fail, and which certainly in the views of the public we did fail, but the vote did not come to the SJB. The particular vote went to the NPP.
That's right.
So similarly, I don't think that we can just wait and hope that let's say when they govern the country for some times, I'm sure more problems will crop up. It's natural, and hope that the voters will want us back. We too need to have an
to be more proactive, perhaps.
Proactive and a feasible alternative. Okay, we need to look back and find out where we went wrong. Certainly, I think as far as managing the economy was concerned, we got that correct under Ranil Wickremesinghe. But there are certain things I think both whoever had been the presidents in Sri Lanka, such as on corruption, because what the NPP was harping on was about corruption, and that there was no political will by the top to curb corruption, and that resonated with the people in these elections. Certainly under President Ranil Wickremesinghe, we saw the anti-corruption bill act being brought into being passed. And we saw for the first time that a minister, while sitting, was arrested on corruption on Minister Kelly Rambukwella. So we saw some progressive steps, but I think in the eyes of the people, it was too little, too late. So we need to make sure that we are also a viable alternative to the government, and we also need to let the current government govern for some time.
Now, you spoke of corruption, but it's all very well to talk about wiping out corruption, eradicating corruption. These are all catchphrases. But corruption has built up in this country over decades. It's to many institutions, it's a way of life. It's the way they do business. It's not one person came in there and said, we're going to be corrupt. It's the way things have happened. So this will take a very long time, wouldn't you say, to set it straight?
Absolutely. I was actually, I think I forget the gentleman's name. I was looking at a YouTube lecture by, I think, Dr. Pethiagoda, and he was a fantastic lecture which he gave on corruption. And I would advise anybody to actually go through that. But what we are mainly concerned is the grand corruption. That corruption has different forms, not let's say not you have systematic corruption, but the main concern, I think, at least for me, is the grand corruption. Then you have petty corruption. Let's say you want something done, they want a santosam in order for it to get done. So different forms of corruption has to be addressed differently. Let's say corruption at a lower level can be handled through, let's say, mainly through technological advances, but the corruption, the grand corruption can be stopped only through meaningful political will.
So you're talking about things like the bond scam, sugar scam, garlic scam, all these different white collar sort of corruption on the large scale.
Yes, yes, indeed. Yeah.
Right. And of course, again, it's been a lack of political will, and these are high profile cases.
Yeah.
But would you say that the perceived inaction on these high profile cases was a huge factor in the downfall of the government?
Well, of course, I think, but I don't think, you can just pinpoint it to those two cases.
Yeah.
And, I wouldn't.
Well, there are many such cases.
There are many such cases, and I wouldn't, to be fair to.
We can't presume anybody
guilty or not guilty. But I think the more important thing is that, if, let's say, pertaining to the bond scam, okay, did Mr. Arjuna Aloysius, did he benefit from the bond scam? And, certainly the answer would be yes. And from the sugar scam, did the Wilma or I don't know, whatever the company or whoever the people involved, did anybody benefit from the transaction? I think certainly yes. So I think you need to certainly look at things such as that, and maybe bring in, if let's say, to providing that inside information, and if there are no, if the laws are not strong, we need to bring more legislation in order to curb things such as inside information.
Well, some of these matters are already before court, and we hope many of those which are not would actually go before court, so that then one way or the other we would know. The process would have been followed. If there are no convictions for a particular case, so be it. It's up to the justice system, isn't it?
Yes and no. I think, in sense, the final verdict is up to the justice system. So imagine if you were in a apartheid situation or something, we can't say it's up to the justice system. Okay, because if the justice system by itself is
not strong enough, sound enough. Yes.
Or let's take if there's, let's assume for a minute, if the justice system too is mooted by corruption. Now it's very difficult for us to think that if, from what you said also, that, if there's corruption all over Sri Lanka in every form, we can't expect an island of honesty in an ocean of corruption pertaining to only one institution. So I think we also have to have a review of whether it's working, and I think a lot of the people, when they voted with the NPP, they felt that the system is not working. Pretty much, they felt that you have the haves and you have the have-nots, and the haves are the politicians and the people around them. And how the haves make their money is through getting favors from the politicians and things such as that. So if the system is not working, I think this is a very good opportunity for the new government to put certain structures in place for the future.
Now the people, they expect miraculous results in some ways. In other ways, they do say, give this government more time. But the amount of time is, of course, subjective. So it could be, now when you talk about eradicating corruption, if perhaps in 6 months or 1 year there is no significant progress to be seen, do you see the electorate turning the other way and being disappointed?
Yeah, I think.
Would they wait for 5 years, or would they? It seems to me that within about a year, given the nature of Sri Lankans, they will start grumbling.
Yeah, and perhaps people will grumble, but if you're trying to get at is, will people get into the streets and agitated against the government? I don't think so. Okay, I think, what happened in 2022, there was some extraordinary circumstances behind that.
Complete breakdown of
the
day-to-day life.
Day-to-day life, the COVID, and then the economic, hardship that people had to face. There was no electricity. So unless that there is some economic catastrophe, such as what we experienced in 2022, I don't see people coming into the streets or something. So I think, the people now the NPP will try to have the elections as soon as possible in order to ride this wave. So it'll be an interesting period. You will have about 4 years or 3.5 years without any elections, and then the next elections that they will have to face is the
local government.
And then next elections, what I meant was that after the cycle is finished, the next elections is again the presidential election after 5 years. So during the 3.5 years or 4 years where they do not have elections, it will be interesting to see if the people are not happy with the government. How do you express it? Now, that's why I said that the people's expectations particularly with technology has skyrocketed. If you look at the Labour government in UK, the Prime Minister's popularity ratings have completely plummeted. So it's not just common to, I don't think it's something which you only see in Sri Lanka, you see it globally. People are becoming quite impatient. So whatever the good things this government plans on doing, I would think that it will be good if they can do them quite quickly. Because now they've been talking about a new constitution. So of course you need to go to a referendum in order to have a new constitution. So if they are serious about it, then you should start having the discussions now. In 2.5 years' time, the popularity of this government will be questionable. So if they're serious about this, about the corruption, if they and strengthening the institutions, I think this is the right time to act on it.
Do you see this government's the massive majority that it has actually causing it to become complacent in any way over the next few years? Because we've seen that happening whenever we have had 2/3 majorities. The ruling party tends to become complacent. They've got the 2/3 majority, and they don't sort of realize that with it comes this huge responsibility and expectation, and if they don't deliver up to the expectation of the voters, that the downfall is just as quick.
I hope not. I mean, because we can't fail. It's as simple as that. We failed once, and if we fail again, it'll take us a very long time to come out of it. We won't be able to come out of it in 2.5 years or 3 years. It'll take a much longer period for us to come out of it. So I hope that for the sake of the country, that the current government will not become complacent, and that they will do what they have to do. But I also think the political structure in the NPP and the JVP is different from the political structure in the other parties. So it's very difficult to right now comment. But I think the expectations when Gotabaya came to power, President Gotabaya came to power, was much higher. Okay, but whereas with the NPP government, most people seems to take a position saying that they'll be they'll be only in power for 6 months, they'll be power for 2 years or some sort of an attitude like that. So I don't think the people's expectations is as high as when President Gotabaya came into power. But ultimately, ultimately it's the economic upturn which will decide whether people will vote with them or not. If the youth won't get any employment. And one of the presidential advisors, I read it in Daily Mirror, says that you need to reduce the public sector to 750,000. Yeah, which is fantastic if they do it.
But it's not easy to do, because then you have to create that many jobs elsewhere.
Okay, and right now, are we seeing enough growth in terms of jobs in the private sector? I don't think so.
Mr. Balasuriya, I'd like to approach this particular topic of FDI, foreign direct investment. But first, we'll take a short commercial break, and we'll be right back.
A trusted place for your fixed deposit. Valuable FD, a symbol of stability.
Gammadda, improving lives, elevating communities. Constructing essential bridges that connect villages in Ampara, Dehiyattakondia, in Rithi Maliadda, Badulla. A new bridge will improve daily travel for over 600 residents in Koleyaya and Aldenia. In Mahayangana, another bridge will provide critical access over the Unagala Oya, meeting the needs of local families. Committed to connecting communities and fostering progress across Sri Lanka. Gammadda, Sri Lanka's most impactful rural development movement.
For the people, by the people. Gammadda.
Welcome back to Face. We are with Mr. Tharaka Balasuriya, former State Minister of Foreign Affairs. Mr. Balasuriya, let's talk about the growth of the economy. Now, Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe's regime did bring about some positive growth. I think the latest projections are for something like 4.5% GDP growth for 2024. Which is quite excellent, and 2025 we would expect to be even better. However, we do need to see something more than 6%, perhaps close to 7%, in order to get back on our feet as a nation after our economy crumbled 2 years ago or 3 years ago. Now, to do this, we need a lot of foreign direct investment, don't we? I mean, there's only so far that the local economy, local companies and conglomerates can push this economy forward. How do we take that quantum leap in getting large multinational corporations to come and invest here?
I think there's certainly several steps that government needs to take in order to attract the FDIs. One of it is that we need to get into more multilateral agreements or even bilateral FTAs, which the president.
Any particular countries you're thinking of?
The President Wickremesinghe expressed his desire to get a membership of RCEP countries. That's 15 countries. These ASEAN plus 5 countries. That's the largest trading bloc in the world. But in order to be a member of get into the RCEP, you need to have your bilateral agreements with the 15 countries. But also, we need to open up the economy. So that will be an interesting thing, whether this government will open up the economy, or whether they will get into FTAs. Without getting into FTAs, we are not going to be part of the equation when it comes to the supply chain management of the world.
No, that's the FTAs are one aspect, one crucial aspect that multinational corporations do look at when they're evaluating a country, isn't it?
Yeah, that's so that's I think would be the foundation. But in addition to that, we need to get things right, such as like the ease of doing business. In order to get, for example, permits in Sri Lanka, whatever the permit from, it takes a long time. So we've been talking about having this one-stop shop, and the current president also has been talking about the same. So I think that we need to find ways to expedite when an investor is asking for certain approvals, that we need to expedite those approvals.
Are you talking about digitalization?
Digitalization will certainly be one part of it. But let's take, for example, customs. Okay, if you digitalize the customs, then, for example, the corruption will reduce. But in addition to that, it will also take a shorter period of time for the goods to move within the country. When you are asking for a bribe or something, you kind of hinder that person's the natural flow. So in order for that person to come and meet you, and in order for that person to entice you with a bribe, so digitalization is part of it, but also the processes has to be looked at completely. But other things such as the labor laws, for example, now if you want to, everybody talks about, all the presidents have been talking about the IT being a major area of a growth area in Sri Lanka. But if you are to have an IT company, you need to, how does the ecosystems when it comes to these the startups work? You come up with an idea, you have a startup, then you try to get some funding, and then let's say if it doesn't work out, or if the idea doesn't work out, you close shop and then you move to the next idea. Okay, so with the laws which we have pertaining to the hiring and firing in Sri Lanka, you can't attract IT companies if they adhere to the same laws. So we need to have the labor laws, new labor laws, and also we need to have the talent pool. In order for those the large multilaterals to come, we need to make sure that a lot of the Sri Lankans are leaving the country. So we need to ensure that there's a good talent pool which remains in the country. So I have been advocating, or I think that we should not only look at opening the merchandise markets, but we should also look at opening up the labor markets. There's nothing wrong with opening up the labor market. If you are confident that you are going to be a good interviewer, okay, then you don't have to worry about the Indian guy coming and taking your seat. Okay, I know that some people talk about professionals and all that, but look at all the skyline in Colombo. I bet that most of those buildings have not been designed by local architects. Yes, the sky rises, they have been designed in Singapore or somewhere. So either way, it's working towards that, and in certain industries, for example, such as the hospitality industry, it's Sri Lankan girls don't want to go and work in hotels. Simple as that.
It's a cultural issue.
It's a cultural issue. So then what happens? Then if you don't have people, then you need to get people from overseas. So I think you need to open up the labor markets, and also I think in certain industries, in certain technological oriented industries, government getting involved, it's all right, because as a form of capital creation. Sometimes people might not want to touch those industries, and so in order to get a early movers advantage, it will be good that if the government pump some money into those industries, such as the IT industry.
Now, how do we compete with nations which have overtaken us in attractiveness? For example, if you talked about the 1950s, 1960s, we were more attractive, perhaps than India, Malaysia, Vietnam, certainly many of those countries. But today, those countries are able to draw in a lot more FDI because they are perceived as being well, it's easier to do business, whether it's transportation, labor laws, whatever, banking systems, whatever. And most multinational corporations don't seem to even consider Sri Lanka. So are we particularly bad at taking lessons from our neighboring countries when we see perhaps Malaysia doing something which works? Why is it that, is there some cultural issue where we don't sort of say, okay, we could do that here as well?
Yeah, I think a little bit of both. I think, since even if you move from 1948 onwards, that the leaders at that time had the inherent fear that Sri Lanka will turn into the socialist country or Marxist country. So that's why even the first Prime Minister D.S. Senanayake didn't want complete independence, and that's why it was a dominion of status. So I think we have island mindset, thinking that if we open up the economy, that's a terrible thing. And I think people tend to think that we need to protect the local industries. That infant industry argument is well and good, for a certain period of time, but you can't be an infant industry forever. So we need to compete with the international the players, and we need to be competitive at that. So in order to do that, I think we need to open up the economy. And the fact that we have not opened up the economy has been although we say that we have opened up the economy in 1977, it wasn't completely opened. Okay, and you can see that I think the customs as a percentage of taxes comes to about 14%. Okay, so that normally the developed countries it's about 4 or 5%. So that goes to show that we are taxing either the imports or exports. And that's why it's a high percentage. So that can't happen. I mean, if you just look at your life, okay, would improve if there's more imports into the country, not just exports, but also imports into the country. If you are going to use a phone which is locally manufactured, or if you're going to use a phone or a vehicle which is locally manufactured, or a TV which is locally manufactured, then the quality of your life might not be that good. Okay, so I think we need to move away from that mindset, thinking that following these protectionist policies is going to save the day. It has not. So that's why I keep repeating that we need to open up the economy. And my fear is that the NPP having a left Marxist ideology, how much they will be willing to open up the economy. So then what happens is, the structural changes which are needed in the economy, we keep postponing them, whereas the other countries have already done these changes, and they are well on their way to integrate with larger markets. Now,
you said something which I want to debate a little bit. You use the word Marxist.
Yeah.
Now, of course, because of the origins of the JVP, the Marxist label has stuck with the NPP. But in view of their performance over the last couple of months in government, would you say that the Marxist label is actually not correct, but that they are more perhaps center-left as such, or would it be better to describe them as socialist rather than Marxist?
I mean, I wouldn't want to put a label on them. I think it's something which they should be talking about. But there's different forms of Marxism also. Let's take even let's take a universal income policy which was which was at one time proposed in Switzerland, and they had a referendum, and then it got defeated. One can argue it's a very Marxist concept, having a universal income mechanism. No, certainly they're not Marxist in what Marx traditional sense of what Marx believed. So that's why I said that I'm quite happy that they've been fairly pragmatic. They said that they will change the understanding with the IMF. They will renegotiate it, but now they have come to the realization that if they start renegotiations, it'll take another 1 year, or it'll take 9 months to 1 year in order to reach another agreement. So thereby they say the course of action is to continue with the IMF agreement. So I think that's fairly pragmatic, although I'm not going to get into the fact that whether they are the election promises which they said whether they'll be fulfilling them or not. That's something which the people will have to decide in the future.
Now, when it comes to global challenges or upheavals, things like war in the Middle East would cause a spike in oil prices, or another pandemic or something like that. Yeah. Sri Lanka is not particularly well placed to take on such challenges, are we? I mean, we saw during the pandemic, the COVID pandemic, we did very badly in the end, although of course the government was proactive in taking decisions, but in the end our economy suffered because we seem to have a lot of exposure which we can't deal with. And again, the same thing, when oil prices go sky high, of course most of the world is affected, but Sri Lanka particularly so. How do you prepare for these challenges?
Well, there's certain X factors which you can never prepare for. Okay, let's say something like COVID, it was unprecedented, and I think not only Sri Lanka, a lot of other countries also was very ill prepared. But I think Sri Lanka did extremely well during the COVID period. The government, first in terms of curtailment, they had, and in second, in terms of the immunization program. Although we didn't produce the injections, I think our immunization rate was at a very high rate. So I think we managed to manage to control the COVID situation quite well. But as far as the economy goes, I think there was stress on the economy even before Gotabaya Rajapaksa came into power. The Easter attack, after the Easter attack, there was a dip in tourism, and then I think in November, December, January, the tourist arrivals exceeded 200,000, but then again in April you had the COVID, and then the economy suffered. So there was a lot of stress in the Sri Lankan economy before he took over. But I don't think the global situation. I'm optimistic that now that President Trump has come to power.
Now that's interesting that you're optimistic, because a lot of the world seems to be rather pessimistic about it, or actually wondering what's going to happen, because with Mr. Trump, it's a surprise every day, isn't it? I remember during his first stint as president, it was very entertaining in a way. I used to go home and put on CNN to see what Trump had done, because it was always something very unexpected. So of course it's easy to laugh at him and what he does, because he is very entertaining, but his policies have a far-reaching effect on the world. So already, even before taking office, he has said that he's going to increase tariffs on China, Canada and Mexico. So he's picking fights with them already, and they have responded, in kind, with certain verbal warnings. And then he's also seems to have picked a fight with the BRICS countries as well. So where do you see this going, in as much as he is so unpredictable?
I don't think he's unpredictable. Okay, I mean, certainly he describes himself as a nationalist. Okay, so if I am an American citizen and if I am an American nationalist, I would put my country before the rest of the countries. And I think that's exactly what the President Trump is doing. So if you look at and some of the things which he's asking for are not unreasonable. He's asking Europe to spend 2% of their GDP on defense, which they had committed to spend. And I think, okay, he's a businessman, he's a showman, so he wants to get the best deal for America. I think as every leader should try. But okay, certain things, let's say, I might not agree with his policies when it comes to the environment and things such as that. But I think he's just looking after America's interest. And as far as the BRICS countries go, yes, I think the US will always try to protect its place in the hegemony. They will always want the US dollar to be the reserve currency. But I think it's inevitable that the BRICS countries will start trading with one another more than they're doing now. And what the BRICS countries were looking at is they were not looking for their own currency. They were looking at a digital currency for the BRICS countries. So I think either way, some people feel that the biggest threat for the US dollar is not the BRICS countries or the yuan. The biggest threat for the US dollar will be the cryptocurrencies. And so President Trump is quite strong in that tent. He has stated that they want to make cryptos or Bitcoin or whatever part of their reserves. I think Switzerland is also trying to make cryptos part of their reserves.
In fact, since Mr. Trump won the election, the value of cryptocurrencies has been shooting through the roof globally, hasn't it?
Yeah. So I think although President Trump will do his utmost to ensure that the US dominance will continue. But the other countries are also, if you look at the BRICS members, they are big countries, and it can backfire. And if you put these sanctions or the 100% tariffs, see what happened with Russia. Okay, they put these tariffs on Russia. Russians started importing Chinese vehicles, Chinese electric vehicles, and
trade with India.
Trade with India and China. They started selling oil to India and China, and India and China was also able to get the Russian oil at a subsidy. So it has both the trade between those countries has benefited because of the sanctions they have put to Russia. So I think some country trying to block another country trading with a third country First of all, I think it's immoral. Okay, I don't think just because you're the world leader and you should be telling other countries who you should and who you should not be trading with.
You shouldn't be the bully on the block.
Well, they have always been the bully. They have taken unilateral decisions pertaining to sanctions. But I don't think that. But now the world becoming more multipolar, I think it's all changing. So trying to continue with the old system, I don't think it will be feasible in the future.
Right. Do you see any direct impact of Mr. Trump's becoming president again on South Asia, particularly India and of course Sri Lanka?
Well,
or are we off his radar? Is he fixed on China, Russia, Mexico, and so on?
Yeah, well, I think even if it's not, if we are off his radar, I think we are certainly not off the radar of the State Department, and certainly the foreign policy in the United States to a large degree is done through the State Department, irrespective of who the president. I think you have Trump is assembling the billionaires as part of his the cabinet. I read that they are the
Elon Musk and so on.
I read that this was some incredible figure, said that their combined wealth is more than 160 countries or something. The 160.
That would not be surprising.
It's some insane figure. Yeah. You have this elite businessmen who are big time capitalists. So I think it would be good for the current government also to move away from that the Marxist logo, and yes, they have by the action shown that they're moving away from that Marxist the slogans, but
perhaps to embrace a bit more capitalism.
They will have to embrace a little bit more capitalism, because the thing in the US is that if you are even identified as a socialist, okay, you are not going to get vote. You pretty much that people tend to think that you're anti-system. Okay, you think you're evil or something if you're a socialist. And if you are a Marxist or if you are a communist, then I don't think that the ordinary people can even imagine somebody being a Marxist. So that's why some Bernie Sanders,
more of a socialist.
Since he identifies himself as a socialist, that's why he'll never make it to. He'll win his primaries. Because people just wouldn't vote for a socialist. So it can have an impact, okay, with the mindset of the people in the Trump administration.
So we need to be careful.
We need to be
where
careful.
We position
yes,
ourselves.
Yes.
Right. And I'm afraid on that note we are out of time. My thanks to Mr. Tharaka Balasuriya, former State Minister for Foreign Affairs. Thank you very much for taking the time to be with us this evening. And thank you very much to you at home for watching. Don't go away. The news is coming up next. Have a good evening.